أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. In the last class we spoke about the obligation of preserving the tongue and the obligation of preserving the eyesight. In this section here, he's going to mention the rest of these things. Some of them come from each one of the categories that we had mentioned before. So here he's giving an overview of the things that are not permissible or that are wajib to preserve in respect to the limbs of the body. And then he'll go on to mention the things that are haram for a mukallaf to indulge in. And he says rahimahullah, وَيَجِبُ عَلَيْهِ حِفْظُ جَمِيعِ جَوَارِحِهِ مَا اسْتَطَاعَ. Yani it is obligatory alayhi, on the mukallaf, to preserve and protect all of his limbs according to his ability. And it's important here that he says mastata'a, according to his ability, because a person is not requested to do what is over his ability. So everybody will be judged according to their ability. So he says that it is obligatory for a person to preserve all of his limbs and to protect them according to his ability. And know that the limbs that he's talking about here are 7, because these are the 7 limbs of the these 7 limbs of the body are the limbs that are capable of gaining reward and gaining punishment, meaning that they have the ability of doing good acts and the ability of committing non-permissible acts. These 7 things: the first one is the tongue, then the eyes, then the ears, then the private parts, then the hands, the feet, and the stomach. One more time, these 7 limbs that he's talking about in the text are the tongue, the eyes, the ears, the private parts, the hands, the feet, and the stomach. These 7 limbs, a person who is responsible for the Sharia must try his best to protect these limbs from committing sin. Then he goes on to say, وَأَنْ يَحِبَّ لِلَّهِ وَيُبْغِضَ لَهُ. Yani to love for Allah, to love something for the sake of Allah, and to hate for the sake of Allah. Now these 2 actions, contrary to what's going to come after it, are considered transitive, meaning that they take an object, meaning to يحب لله, to love something for the sake of Allah, must take an object. For example, a person loves somebody for the sake of Allah, or they love that act for the sake of Allah. For example, some people love sadaqah, yani giving charity, so they love that for the sake of Allah. And وَيُبْغِضَ لَهُ, and to hate for the sake of Allah. And to hate for the sake of Allah is, for example, smoking or music, like this music that we have generally now on television, all this rap music and this rock and roll music. When we see it, we hate it, and that is a sign of Iman, as mentioned in the hadith. So it is wajib for a person to love for the sake of Allah and to hate for the sake of Allah. And a person who, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that a person who has these characteristics has tasted from the fountain of Iman. So a person should hate for the sake of Allah and to love for the sake of Allah. And hate doesn't mean that you react wild to it, as which is intended somewhat in our customs. When you hate somebody, meaning, or when you hate somebody, you show vigor against them, even if they're nice to you. Hate means that we dislike that thing for themselves and for anybody else. So, for example, you see some type of indecency. Upon seeing that indecency, you feel this thing. When you see that thing, it makes you feel a hate for that thing, and you would hate it for yourself, and you would hate it for the people who are doing it, and you would hate it for your fellow brother or your fellow sister to indulge in that thing. The same thing for loving for the sake of Allah. You see a wealthy person giving sadaqah for the sake of Allah. You love that thing, and you love it for yourself, and you love it for that person who's doing it. Furthermore, you would love it for your brothers and sisters to do it as well, because they will get a great reward for doing so. So that's يُحِبَّ لِلَّهِ وَيُبْغِضَ لَهُ. Now he goes on to mention وَيَرْضَى لَهُ وَيَغْضَبَ لَهُ, yani to be pleased for his sake and to be angry for his sake. The difference between these two and the two previous that we mentioned is these two are internal states. What do we mean by internal states? To be pleased with Allah is an internal feeling of pleasure, meaning that, for example, that a person who wasn't born a Muslim and led a life of error and then accepted Islam and finds himself praying and making sujood for the sake of Allah, he feels this sense of pleasure because he knows what it's like to be misguided. So it's an internal feeling. Whereas to love for the sake of Allah takes an object. So the word وَيَرْضَ لَهُ وَيَغْضَبَ لَهُ, also to be angry for his sake, is an internal feeling. For example, when you see some type of injustice happening in front of your face that you know Allah is not pleased with, you get this feeling inside that makes you, in Arabic we would say, narrow, and meaning that you just don't feel good upon seeing it. You're angry, you wish this type of thing didn't exist. You don't like to see people affected or to see people harmed by such a thing, so you hate it and you feel it, and it bothers you. And وَيَرْضَى لَهُ just means to be pleased and to have thankfulness for the sake of Allah for all that He has done for you. And وَيَعْمُرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ means to command the good and forbid the evil. But the real meaning of the word al-ma'ruf means كل ما أمر به شرعا, all things that have been ordered to be done in the Sharia, whether it's wajib or mustahab, is what we call al-ma'ruf. Ma'ruf means known. Why? Because the Sharia knows it. So we call it al-ma'ruf. So here we're supposed to command the people to do the ma'ruf. Doesn't translate as to do good. It translates to do what is commanded in the Sharia. And those are the things such as following the Prophet ﷺ in his actions and encouraging people to do it. For example, if we hear a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, do so and so and you'll get the reward of so and so, we encourage people to do it because it's called al-ma'ruf. And the beauty of al-ma'ruf is that we know that when we do the action, that we're establishing the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Contrary to those things that are not established by the Sharia and not recognized by the Sharia, we cannot be sure that this type of act will be a means of reward in the hereafter. So it is very important to command, and command here can mean command or request the people to do what is recognized by the Sharia. وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And the munkar, al-munkar is the opposite, meaning that it's all of what the Sharia has prohibited from doing, whether that be disliked or haram. So the importance of commanding the good and forbidding the evil, or commanding what the Sharia commands to be done and prohibiting what the Sharia doesn't approve of, is important because as long as the Muslim community practices this type of action, then Islam will remain the way it was from the beginning. And when we don't enforce al-ma'ruf wal-munkar, then our religion becomes full of innovations to the point that people cannot distinguish between what's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and what's considered an innovation. And unfortunately, in these times, our ummah is riddled with innovations, and because of the fact that we haven't kept up the duty of commanding the ma'ruf and prohibiting al-munkar. So to the point that people perform types of worship or types of customs that they assume are from the religion but have no source in the religion or have no base in the religion, but people spend their time focusing on these forms of worship and cannot be sure that they will reap any benefits from them because they don't have any source in the Sharia. And may Allah protect us from that and make us of those who are from the Sunnah of Muhammadiyah. Furthermore, the beauty of practicing those sunnahs that are established through hadith and highly encouraged by our ulama is that we have certainty of these actions and feel a sense of closeness to the Prophet ﷺ. But if we tie our hearts to acts that are not established in the Sunnah, then we don't have that reality and feeling of being close to the Prophet ﷺ because these acts have not been established through his Sunnah. Then he goes on to talk about the things that are haram.